No room for Jake Fraser-McGurk. Australia picks a tried and tested World Cup squad, but is it the right approach? We ask former Australia captains Michael Clarke and Tim Paine. Rishabh Pant back in blue as he completes an astonishing comeback from his near-death experience. And could Shane Watson be in line for a Big Bash coaching gig? Let's go around the wicket.
Is the door still open for Jake to be in the 15 if he continues the IPL form that he's got at the moment?
Oh, we're comfortable with the balance as it sits, but there's a lot of cricket to be played. So if that changes, we're open to changing it. There'll need to be a reason, whether that's through injury. Form's clearly a metric. Fitness is a metric, so it's just about making sure that balance is maintained.
And just as a follow-up to that, you're looking at the squad, you've got 10 players who are either injured, not in form, or not playing at the moment. How concerning is that out of the 15 just overall?
In an ideal world, you've got everyone absolutely flying, but there's still a reasonable amount of time until the actual tournament starts. So you're hoping a few of those injury concerns clear up before then. But again, just making sure that you've got the balance come the start of the tournament, that by the time that tournament does start, everyone's fit. But we do have good faith that once they're actually in Australian colours and around this group, around Mitch and around the coaching staff, that we can get everyone in a really good place.
Selector George Bailey there. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Around the Wicket, a bit of a World Cup edition. I'm Neroli Meadows. I've got Callum Ferguson alongside me and Michael Clarke joining us from India, where he's commentating on the Indian Premier League. Pup, no room for Jake Fraser-McGurk. What are your initial thoughts on that call?
Yeah, hello guys. It's been a busy few days over here, I can tell you. World Cup teams going around everywhere. Look, I think Australia's probably kept the faith, haven't they, in a lot of players. They've probably backed their international cricket rather than looking too deeply at the current IPL that's going on and picking on recent form. Some interesting selections, but I can certainly understand where the selectors are coming from and why they've gone that way. The Jake Fraser-McGurk one's a tough one to swallow. I understand he hasn't played much. He's just come onto the scene over here in the IPL in regards to playing in these conditions, but he's been so dominant over here. He's handled the pressure. He's handled the big stage. There was a lot of talk leading up to the game against Mumbai. How's he going to go against that next class in Bumrah? And I think he took him for 15 or 18 off his over. There's been some talk about he doesn't play spin that well. Well, he's dominated the spin over here. Fastest 50, I think, twice he's got in this IPL. So I thought Jake would have made the squad of 15. I thought his impact has been that significant, but the selectors haven't gone that way. And I don't think he'll be too disheartened. He's a great kid. He wants to play for Australia in all formats, and I think he'll just keep working hard. And this might just drive him a bit harder to push for more success, I guess. But yeah, from a personal point of view, I thought he would have been in the 15.
It is a provisional 15, so there's still time to make changes. In the IPL, he's averaging 43, a strike rate of 233. Have they got it right? Because the public is outraged.
Yeah, look, I was a bit flat. I'm a bit like Pup. I felt like he was going to make the squad, and I'm a bit disappointed he's not there. 2 15-ball 50s, which is extraordinary within such a short space of time against such high quality in the IPL. It doesn't get much tougher when it comes to bowling attacks and competition. And he's done it on slowish wickets. You know, they're great wickets over there in India at the moment. But you would say generally a player like him might struggle to get his feet in the ground and get settled. No problems for him whatsoever, which makes me really feel like he'd be perfect for a World Cup in the West Indies and USA. Particularly because there's going to be a lot of very worn wickets. Without going into too much detail, there's going to be a lot of used wickets for the Australians. Maximising the power play is going to be crucial. I felt like he might have been the right man to get to the top of the order for Australia and really put some attacks to the sword early.
Also, the top four when you...
Nez, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. The other thing I thought he offered was that right-left-hand combination at the top of the order. But a lot of people think he was going to be replacing David Warner. I didn't think that way necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I think Davey could have still played a role in the middle because he plays spin very well, because he's been around for such a long time and he's super experienced. But again, he offers a left-hand option through the middle order. At the moment with the squad that we've picked, we're very right-hand dominant. So that's why I thought maybe Jake at the top of the order with Ferg. With Ferg. Ferg, you can be out there.
Can I be out there too?
Eddie,
with Travis Head, sorry. And can you imagine bowling attacks around the world seeing Travis Head and Jake Fraser-McGurk walk out together for the start of a World Cup match? I think they all would have been a little nervous. So I just thought maybe for options through that middle right-hand combination at the top, they might have went that way.
And as it stands at the moment, the top four, you're looking at Head in form, Warner injured and not in the best of form when he was playing, Mitch Marsh injured, not in the best of form when playing, and Maxwell not in the best of form. So it's a shaky top four. Yes, we know that when they're at World Cups, they do tend to come to the fore. But the form is a bit of a concern and those players not playing as well. Patrick Cummins not captaining this one. Mitch Marsh will be the World Cup captain, Michael Clarke. You've heard a few question marks, though, after a couple of losses for the Sunrisers. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think at the moment there's a little bit of talk about how Paddy's using himself for the Sunrisers because he's such a good player and he's been a wicket-taking option for Australia for a long period of time. I think a lot of people want to see him used more, certainly in the power play, in that aggressive approach, I guess, looking to take wickets early. And then again, probably a bit more at the death because he's got great variations, Paddy. We know how quick he can bowl. We know how accurate he is, but he's got good change of pace. He's got a brilliant slower ball bouncer. I think Paddy reads the game really well, so he can bowl to his field. A lot of bowlers at the moment under pressure, it's like their captain and their bowler are on separate pages. The captain's setting a field and the bowler's bowling the other side of the wicket. So, you know, I think sometimes at the death, it's as much about the smartest brains as much as the best bowlers. So there's been a bit of talk about that. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how he's used at the World Cup because he's not captain. So a lot of this will be taken out of his hands. Mitch Marsh will go for who he feels his best option is at that time. So I think that's probably something Paddy's got to think about as well. How he's bowling for Sunrisers might be very different to how he bowls for Australia. So even if he can mix that up a little bit for Sunrisers, again, I'm prioritising Australia, thinking so he's as well prepared as he can be for the World Cup. It's like some blokes might be opening the batting in this IPL, but playing for Australia, you might be batting 4, 5 or 6. So your roles are different when you play for your country. And maybe Paddy needs to be prepared for that as much as he can be as well.
It's really interesting commentary that coming from over in India because it's actually the opposite to what we've probably experienced as Australian fans and pundits here in Australia. He actually bowls himself the hard overs more often than not. So I'm not sure whether it's just been him playing the game and seeing it and playing the game that's in front of him and maybe not really focusing so much on what's the hardest moment. Maybe it just doesn't match up right now. So I've always seen him as the captain that puts his hand up.
Also in Test cricket, a lot of people say they'd love to see him open the bowling, but he's got Hazelwood and Stark there. And in the One-Day World Cup last year, he was the one that was breaking those partnerships, those established partnerships through the middle. So I take your point. Steve Smith is a fascinating one. Michael Clarke, he's missed out on this provisional World Cup squad. Has the time come where he should now focus on red ball cricket, especially with this new role as Test opener? What do you think?
I think Smitty would be aware that his time in T20 cricket's probably done now. I think the World Cup is probably the one place you can keep the faith with your senior players. The fact they haven't gone that way, I think that is a fair indication that moving forward, you'd like to think they'll move to someone like a Jake Fraser-McGurk at the top of the order before going back to Smitty. So he's probably aware of that. And I think, again, from what Smitty was saying when he was over in India commentating, doing some stuff for Star, he made it pretty clear to just about everyone that he didn't expect to be selected. So I don't think he'll be too surprised. One-day cricket, I don't think that's the case unless he feels his time's done. I think he's still good enough to be in that team. He's been a significant player in that team for a while. And one-day cricket's a lot different to 2020. But the other thing for Smitty, he might actually think now's the time to just concentrate on Test cricket, become the best opener I can be and finish my career there, and then play a few of these 2020 tournaments around the world. And he's still certainly a good enough player to play in the 2020 tournaments. I know he didn't get picked up for the IPL, but there's so many tournaments around the world. He could do that if he wants to keep playing. I think it's going to come down to him. I don't think he'll be dropped from the one-day team, put it that way. I think it'll be more decided by, if he thinks his time's up in short form, then walk away from that and just concentrate on Test cricket.
Ashton Agar gets another opportunity after missing out on the One Day World Cup. That calf injury came at a bad time for him last year. What have you made of his selection? I know you love talking about the spinners, pup.
Oh my God, I better be careful. Zam should keep his receipts. I better be very careful what I say. How dare I like a second spinner in the squad? I love Ash. I really do. I still haven't got to the bottom, or I don't know the full story about what happened in India through the Test series, how he didn't play a part and went home and then obviously didn't come back for those ODI. I don't know what happened there, but I love seeing him back in the squad. I think he's a brilliant player. I think 2020 cricket, he's got all three facets covered. He bats, his bowling's brilliant and accurate, and he's awesome in the field. So he plays a bit of that Axar Patel or Jadeja role for India as well. The other thing I think that Ash offers, if he is going to play in the 11, he can actually open the bowling. Like, he can bowl in the first 6 in the power play. So that's a good variation for us to have and a good option for us to have. Zamps is not going to open the bowling. He could bowl in the power play, but he's brilliant through the middle as well. And I think they complement each other very well. If we wanted to play two spinners, Zamps out the back, a left arm orthodox in Ash, I think it's, it's good for us to have that option. And then you pick on conditions. You work out what's the pitch like, who are we playing against, and then we might stay 3 quicks and use Stoinis and we just make do with Travis Head and Maxwell. Or we might say, this wicket's going to spin. We'll go the extra spinner and then also still use Maxwell and Travis Head. So I think it's a brilliant selection and I'm super happy for Ash.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Ash, because we haven't seen him play a lot of cricket in the last 2 years, which has been probably a really tricky one for him. Injury and not being available to play makes it really hard. So, and then playing a lot of his BBL at, Perth Stadium, which doesn't take a lot of spin. So he's going to be relying on a lot of his experience because he hasn't really had an opportunity to get lots of cricket in favourable conditions and get his confidence up. So that's the only concern for mine with him.
Pup, I've got some receipts from the comments that you've just made, so I'll just keep these for after the World Cup. Thank you very much for joining us from India. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Pup.
Maybe you can get another new tattoo. Don't go anywhere after this short break. Tim Paine is going to join us to talk about the keeping debate. We love you, Pup.
Thank you, team.
Welcome back to Around the Wicket. Time to bring in former Aussie captain and keeper Tim Paine. Now, Paine, great to have you back on board on the show. The age profile of this provisional World Cup squad is a really interesting one. They've gone with a very experienced squad. 5 players over the age of 34, 11 players over the age of 30. In fact, Cameron Green is the only player under the age of 28. What do you think about it?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I can see both sides of it. I think any T20 side around the world, whether it's international or franchise, in fact, you could probably say across sport, I think will benefit from an environment where it's really consistent. I think Andrew McDonald and George Bailey and Tony Dodemaide have created that. It's become a team that's probably harder to get out of than it is to get into. So with that, the players get real clarity of their role, consistency in how they want to play the game. And I think they've been playing really well for the last sort of 12 months. Having said that, I've spoken to you before, Neroli, not on the show, about, probably 12 months ago. If it was me, I would have rejuvenated this squad after the last World Cup and thrown in, your Josh Inglis's, your Fraser-McGurks, Hardys, Bartlett's. There's a number of outstanding young T20 players around the country that I thought maybe after the last World Cup we would have gone down this track, given them time to build towards this World Cup and seen how they go. But obviously we've stuck with some proven experience, a number of guys who have just won a 50-over World Cup as well. So they've got plenty of points in the bank, if you like, and I think it's still an amazing side. There's no doubt about that. And I expect them to be at the pointy end come the back end of this tournament. But, yeah, I think maybe an opportunity was missed to rejuvenate this side, but we'll see how they go.
Well, Pup has already announced that Ferg's opening, so he's right in that sweet spot for the age profile. The keeping situation, they've named both Matthew Wade, who's only played 1 IPL game and out for 4, and Josh Inglis, who's not playing at the moment. As a keeper yourself, is it the right call to take in 2 keepers into this squad?
Well, again, I don't think I would have. And people have said to me, well, who's going to keep if someone gets injured and all that sort of stuff. I just think that either Jake Fraser-McGurk, with the form he was in, would have been a better option than a second wicketkeeper. I also think that Matthew Short deserves to be there, given his run of form in the last 2 big bashes and the flexibility and cover that he gives you for literally every other player in that squad. So I would have gone that way. But again, I think Josh Inglis has got a huge career in international cricket. I just think the other two offered more flexibility for the squad. And if you look at the 50 over World Cup that's just finished, we had Tanvi Sangha there as a shadow player. So I think we had the opportunity to do that with Josh, have a wicketkeeper there on standby as the shadow player. But in that squad, I would have gone with Jake Fraser-McGurk and Matthew Short because I think they just deserve to be there.
They do have a lot of flexibility, but there's no Pete Hanscom, for example, part-time keeper to back up.
That's right. If you don't have another keeper in the 15 itself, if someone goes down, if your wicketkeeper goes down with a busted finger, then it can leave you wide open. But what we don't want to see is Travis Head with the gloves on. Let me tell you, he's got symbols at best behind the stumps. So it is. What's that, mate?
Heady could do the job, but you're underestimating the toughness of wicketkeepers. You have to just get on with it when you break a finger, unfortunately, and it's a 20-over game. So I'm sure Wadey would get through if he had to. And as I said, you'd have the shadow wicketkeeper there in the country ready to go. And wouldn't it have just been amazing to see Jake Fraser-McGurk in that squad if something happened and just for bums on seats and eyeballs on television. 100%. He is the man you want to be watching at the moment. So I'm disappointed from that aspect, but again, understand why they've gone the way they have.
He is an expert in breaking fingers and keeping Tim Paine.
Sure.
One of the wonderful stories about this, and we did know this a few weeks ago, but officially announced that Mitch Marsh will be a World Cup captain. He's injured at the moment with a hamstring. He's going to be back batting soon, George Bailey said, and bowling hopefully by the time they get to that World Cup. But what a story. In and out of the Australian team across all forms, in and out off the contract list as well for Australia. Vice captain, then 6 months later, he's not even on the contract list. This is just a feel-good story for people who love Mitch Marsh, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And Mitch Marsh is a guy that certainly internally for a long time has been loved by his teammates. I think it's taken a little bit longer for the general public to see the real Mitch Marsh. He's such a lovable, charismatic, beautiful character. He's great front in the change rooms, but he's also got that serious side, and he's a real natural leader. He's the sort of guy, whether it's through the size of his frame or whatever it is, but Ferg will tell you, he's the sort of guy you want to follow, and he's a terrific choice, and hopefully he does really well. But I've just been thrilled for him that the Australian public now gets behind him. He's such a great person.
You do see quite a light-hearted Mitch in front of the camera and quite a softly spoken, gentle guy, but you get him out in the park, he's a fierce competitor, like Paine just said, and he is the kind of guy that teams will jump behind. He'll pick them up on their shoulders and go charging into battle. That's what you want at the front of the Australian cricket team.
A 17-year-old debutant for state cricket, now a World Cup captain.
Incredible.
It's a great story for Mitch Marsh. Don't go anywhere, Paine, because after this short break, we're going to talk about the changes to the WBBL and whether or not Tim Paine is going to put his hand up for a coaching gig in the BBL. Don't go anywhere.
I think the chance to optimise the WBBL this season was a really important one, again, for what we've spoken about in terms of attendances, being able to stage games at appropriate times, maximise opportunities with TV and broadcast. And then, as an offshoot of that, what the reduction of the WBBL has really allowed is to give girls who are playing state cricket even more of an opportunity to play matches, and with that comes an increase in remuneration, which means that we're providing girls with a chance to earn more money across the season, which is another great step in the right direction in terms of a fully professional domestic game. So those things considered, it's a really good step and one that's relevant for such a crowded schedule this year, and I'm sure those things will continue to develop as the landscape changes.
Elise Perry there on a 10-year plan to improve the women's game as well as grassroots level to get participation numbers up and women staying in the game for longer. It seems like a great plan on paper, and we keep our fingers crossed, Callum Ferguson, because the time for women's sport is now. The appetite is there, the potential is limitless.
Yeah, that's right. So Cricket Australia have got to get on board, and they have, which is great to see. I've said it for years, the women's game needs more cricket being played, not less. to see this going down the right path now is huge. We've just got to make sure that we stick to it and keep the game growing, because you're right, strike while the iron's hot. And
we know that they have been a leader for quite some time. Oh, yeah. The women's team has been brilliant and really helped on the global stage as well for the game. The
competition globally is getting tougher and harder because everyone else is starting to catch up. So it's great to see Cricket Australia take a positive step with this.
So 40 games for the WBBL Plus finals, which brings it in line with the Big Bash. Tim Paine, there's news that David Saker is set to part ways with the Renegades. Who do you think would get that position?
I've actually thought this for a little while, even when I thought Sakes had another year to run, but I found it interesting last year, given that Cricket Victoria have a stake in the San Francisco Unicorns and Shane Watson was appointed coach there. So if I was joining the dots, knowing that relationship already exists, I know that Shane gets along really well, has a great relationship with Nick Cummins from his time at the Thunder, where they had a bit of success. He would probably be the front runner, along with probably Michael Hussey, who's another guy who had a lot of success with the Thunder, and Nick Cummins. So I think those previous relationships might be sort of starting to align there. But Watto would be my early pick for the Renegades.
You've got a great relationship with the Renegades. What do you think about that?
I've done. Yeah, look, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, Mr. Cricket is another guy that is well regarded in coaching circles and just cricket circles, full stop, Mr. Cricket. But yeah, I think Watto's got to be the front runner.
They've got to read his book, though. That is the number one thing. Paine, the striker's job is up for grabs. Have you put your hand up officially yet?
Not officially, no. I think there's still a bit of water to go under the bridge there with how they go about that role. Obviously, Dizzy was coaching across the Redbacks and the Strikers. I've sort of spoken to some people unofficially and said that that's something that I can't do at this stage. But if they were to go down the splitting of the roles, I would absolutely be interested in trying to coach the Adelaide Strikers. I had a great time there last year, really enjoyed it, learnt a lot. But yeah, so made no secret of the fact that I would like to be a head coach at some stage. I'm only very, very early in my journey, so I realise that putting someone as inexperienced with me in terms of coaching in a position like that would be a huge risk. But yeah, I'd love the opportunity to do it, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Not as big a risk as what you're making it out to be there, Paine. One of the great cricket brains in Australian cricket. I'll say it for him. But it's going to be a hot contest for that role. I would have thought the Strikers won. It's a talented list. It's a great venue, great part of BBL to be a part of, Adelaide Oval. So it'll be tough competition, but Ryan Harris is probably another one that Paine might be up against going for that one, but I would be very surprised if they don't split the roles.
I'm not used to you guys being this nice to each other on Around the Wicket.
Off air, it's a bit different, isn't it?
You brought up the name Jason Gillespie. He has been announced, as Ferg alluded to a few weeks ago, the red ball coach for Pakistan. What's going to be the biggest challenge for him, do you think, Paine?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting when you go and coach an international team. I think the biggest challenge, without knowing everything in Pakistan, is getting some consistency. I think not just on the field, I think it stems from off the field. So, there's always changes of coaches, changes of captain, there's new chairmen, there's new everything. So people seem to get sacked from Pakistan all the time, and people in key positions are always training, and that's not a great environment for teams to play in. So I think the appointment of Jason as red ball coach and Gary Kirsten as the white ball coach, two really experienced guys, hopefully they settle in and let them, give them time to build the programs, because I think they're both really experienced coaches, know what they're doing, but they'll need time to build relationships and create trust in Pakistan. And if they can, we know how much talent is in that country, so it'll be an exciting watch for us.
There's a lot of challenges with taking on a role in Pakistan. Everyone from the chairman of the board down to the fans, they're the most passionate people you'll see about the game of cricket. I just wonder whether it's not just going to be about managing down for Jason Gillespie, but managing up as well, and the people in the administration, because it hasn't been the most stable administration. So that's going to be a real challenge for him.
You talk about passionate cricket fans. What about the Indians? They've announced their World Cup squad, and one of the great feel-good stories in the history of the game. I'm not overcooking this. I'm not overplaying this. Rishabh Pant, we didn't know if he was going to survive, let alone play the game again. He's come back in the IPL. He's done brilliantly, and now I get full-body goosebumps. He is in that World Cup 15. Paine, he's a mate of yours. You've had plenty of banter. Did it just make you feel warm and fuzzy all over?
Yeah, it did. It's great news, as you said, for all cricket lovers, but particularly for us wicket keepers to see such a talent and how his career was taking off before that accident. To sit here now and say that he's probably back on track and going just as well is staggering, I think, from what he's gone through. His movement behind the stumps, he's running between the wickets. He looks absolutely incredible, to be honest. And I can't wait to see him play. You know, making the World Cup squad, I thought was pretty much a Monty for him. I think he's going to be one of their key players. He's a tremendous talent. He's so skillful. It's a bit like when we talked about Fraser-McGurk a few days ago on radio. When you get the mindset that matches the talent, it's amazing to watch. And he is in that bracket. He's one of the most talented cricketers you ever see. He's got such a positive outlook, looks to take the game on all the time. And he's going to be a huge factor in the World Cup. India could have named 25 players and had a competitive team, but he's certainly going to be a huge player in their team.
Tim Paine, thank you very much for your time and congratulations to Rishabh Pant. Don't go anywhere because Ferg's going to take on the short stuff next. He's opening at the World Cup, remember?
Ready to roll.
To take on the short stuff, England. Rob Key has decided that their England players won't be available for the IPL playoffs. It affects people like Captain Joss Buttler. What do you think?
It's a huge call. I mean, it's the first time we've seen one of the bigger nations put their foot down and say, we're pulling our players out of a major period of the IPL, not just the start, but the playoffs. I'm not sure about it. I think it's a good sign, though, that international cricket starts to take precedence.
They'll be playing against Pakistan in T20 internationals. Jofra Archer has made the squad for England. What do you expect from him?
Big things, but I'm enormously excited about this, to see him fronting up with the new ball, hopefully, for England. I'm expecting big things. He'll be champing at the bit.
Impact player at the IPL. Is it time to go?
Get rid of it. Done. It's gone too far in the batter's favour now.
Are you going to be opening at the World Cup?
No.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.